Week 1 of the SEC football season is officially here. Helping us break it all down, Jim Dunaway of The Next Round joins the show. Jim, what's going on, man? Appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, man, I'm excited. Thanks for having me. I would say this is probably the most excited I am about a season since I started broadcasting way back in 1988. So I've done a lot of SEC openers, a lot of college football openers, and having a 12-team playoff really has me fired up with the opportunity now to have so many people in the race in November. So I'm fired up about this.
Jim, you mentioned excitement and hype level. I'm curious to get your thoughts on this because, again, you guys are at the Next Round. You do a great job. You talk the entire SEC. You talk to many different personalities and guests and cover all the different teams. So, Jim, in your mind, I think it's interesting. You mentioned the 12-team playoff. It's created a lot of hype and excitement at places where there's always been excitement, but it's to a new level now. Do you feel like there's anyone, as we get into the season and get into kickoff, is there anybody out there you feel like the hype meter is turned up to an extreme level where it's almost kind of surprised you? Maybe you feel like a fan base is maybe out above their skis, if you will, a little bit, or like, has there been anybody noticeable where you're like, man, like this hype meter is really ratcheted up at this school or that school?
Well, we asked a question on the show the other day. We probably had a 9, 10 deep, if you throw Auburn in there, of people that can paint their way into a college football playoff. Whose excitement level is at the point where they're on the eve of starting their season, but on the eve of what is going to be a disappointing run. And the name that kept reoccurring in our conversation with our audience is Ole Miss, because Ole Miss never made it to Atlanta in the divisional format. And now it's sort of a pseudo sexy pick to have Ole Miss and Georgia play each other in Atlanta for the SEC championship, because the Rebels' schedule is really set up nice for them to where they can win a lot of football games. Another one that, it's going to hit close to home here, but at Alabama, and Alabama fans have a reason to feel this way, but, and I'm one of them. I grew up as an Alabama fan. We are confident by nature, and I don't know if I ever woke up on a Saturday my entire life thinking Alabama didn't have a chance to win a football game. And that's against anybody, anytime, anywhere. I always thought, well, at least they got a chance to win. And now you replace the greatest coach of all time, and you bring in a guy who's really qualified with a really good roster. But I don't think there's a lot of people expecting them to miss a beat. And especially when you have what feels like 2 passes to where you could lose 2 games and still be in the playoffs. I don't think there's an Alabama fan out there either that thinks they're going to miss the playoffs. So I would say Ole Miss is way out over their skis with a schedule that probably prevents them from missing the playoffs, but there's potential they could lose 3, and that would be ultimately disappointing. And it's losing 3 or 4 games just doesn't happen to Alabama for a generation now. So those 2 fan bases are really excited, but there's a ton of them where, as I said, I think you can go as deep as 10 with Auburn on people that think they can paint their way into a college football playoff.
Jim, I want to stick with the Alabama Crimson Tide really quickly, because this is probably one of the most interesting seasons, that we're coming into for Bama in quite some time, with no Nick Saban, the Kalen DeBoer era, and nobody really knows, what we're going to get this season. What's the, again, you're right there in the thick of it. And like you mentioned, you grew up an Alabama fan. So, like, what's the pulse of the fan base right now as the 2024 season kicks off? You open up with Western Kentucky. Is it more excitement? Is it more uncertainty? Is it angst? Is it because it's weird, Jim, to say that Alabama's flying under the radar, but it does feel like for the first time in a while that because of the unknowns, Bama's kind of the 4th or 5th storyline down the list instead of being 1 or 2 when Saban was there.
Well, when you think about the losses in recent years, I would say probably all the way back to 2011, when an SEC team beat Alabama, what happened? If it was on the road, people rushed the field. I mean, there were goalposts being tore down. There were hedges being harmed. And now this year, there are a lot of people that believe they've got that chance to pay back a little bit against Alabama. And Alabama has a difficult schedule, and they've got some tough road games in places like Baton Rouge and in Knoxville and in Norman and, everywhere else that they go on the road this year. So there are a lot of people that think, they can jump around on Alabama at the end of a contest this year, and they'll still do that. But without Nick Saban being the bully in the room, they do think that opportunity is there. for me, I don't think Kalen DeBoer could have done a better job from the moment he was hired to the moment we are sitting at now, game week leading in to a Hey Coach show, his first real radio show on the network tonight. I don't know if he could have done a better job. He hired some great coaches. He did a good job in recruiting. He filled some gaps in the portal. The recruiting for next year is going well. He's a very confident, but has a lot of humility with that confidence. I don't know if anybody could have done a better job. I was around when Bear Bryant retired, and they brought in Ray Perkins from the NFL and the New York Giants. He was the head coach of the Giants, and they brought him to Tuscaloosa, and he came in and he did everything the opposite of Bear Bryant. Did not want to be associated with Bear Bryant. DeBoer, coming from the national championship runner-up, comes into Tuscaloosa, and he says, nope, I'm going to embrace Nick Saban. I'm going to talk to him weekly. He can come to any practice he wants to come to. He can talk about my team in the media. It's not going to bother me at all. My defensive coordinator can go and show him defensive tape and use and pick his brain. We're not tearing down towers. In fact, we're going to put his name on the field. So he's done everything opposite of what Ray Perkins did, replacing Bear Bryant, who was the greatest coach of all time. And now it's Nick Saban, and this guy's come in and said, I'm confident enough. I'm going to do this my way, but I'm also going to embrace the 17-year run that Alabama just had, and I'm going to, use that resource that is Nick Saban, both on the recruiting trail and in the coaching rooms. So I think he's done everything, and I think that's why Alabama fans are optimistic. And truthfully, if it wasn't the fact that he was following Nick Saban, if he was following Mike Shula or Mike DeBoer's, pick any other Mike, Dennis Franchione, any of those people, Bill Curry back in the day, Alabama fans and the college football world would be like, man, Alabama got a home run hire. They got a national championship runner-up coach to come coach them and lead them back to greatness. It just so happens he's replacing the greatest coach of all time. And the greatest coach of all time has now got a microphone, and he's able to pick Georgia, and he's able to pick Texas, and he's able to pick Ole Miss, taking a little bit of the rat poison off Alabama. I think the Tide's in a good position.
Jim, if you listen to those nationally, they sort of want to preach to Bama fans that, hey, make sure you have your expectations in check, right? It's he's not going to be Nick Saban. You mentioned the guy replacing the guy. Has the fan base taken heed of that advice, or is it more so, no, this is Alabama, this is our standard, we don't give a damn who the head coach is?
I think Alabama fans have a reason, but they are absolutely confident Kalen DeBoer in this roster is going to get them where they think they belong. And in all fairness, when have they not been in a championship race in November? Even back in 2010, during Auburn's national championship run, technically Alabama was out of it in the Iron Bowl game, but who knows what had happened if they'd won that game. But when they were in Baton Rouge and that loss before they got to the Auburn game, in November, they were still in the hunt for a national championship. They just usually, when November rolls around, the games to remember in November, Alabama's been in the national championship hunt all the way back to 2008. So until that doesn't happen, these fans are going to stay confident. And you got a quarterback that could be a Heisman Trophy finalist. You got depth at that position. You lost running backs. Saw one play last week in a loss to Florida State. And you sort of feel better about your running back room because those guys were sort of standing in the way of the two young sensations at running back. And you have a receiving core that has the potential of having maybe one guy, maybe two guys that can wake up the echoes of the Devontae Smiths, the Amari Coopers, the Julio Jones. So there's a lot of optimism on the offense. It's the defense that a lot of people aren't talking about. And I think that's where I'm concerned, and people that have any concern about Alabama being the playoffs should really focus on. I'm not worried about this offense scoring 30 a game, 35 a game, 40 a game. I'm worried about the defense allowing 30, 35, 40 a game, and you're having to go out there and putting a lot of pressure on an offense to score almost every possession. I want Kane Womack's defense to show me that they're going to continue the Nick Saban tradition and put a unit out there that can stifle these great offenses we have in 2024.
Jim, on that note, again, you guys are as plugged in as anyone when it comes to fall camp in the state of Alabama. So when it comes to the Crimson Tide, has there been anything that you guys have heard or seen, whether it's standouts or just in reports specifically, that has Has it changed your mind on anything, made you feel better, feel worse in regards to identifying strengths and weaknesses of this football team?
Well, first off, Jalen Milroe's the quarterback, but Ty Simpson's had an unbelievable offseason. And I would go back. It's going to be funny to say because, I don't know if you think either one of them ever play in the NFL, but I'm going to go back to the year when Jalen Hurts was the backup to Tua Tagovailoa, and the year before that, Tua was the backup to Jalen Hurts. That's a pretty good quarterback situation there. And I feel that confident that if Ty Simpson comes into the football game, you're not going to drop off a ton from Jalen Milroe. It'll be done differently, but I think Ty Simpson has been that good. I mentioned the running backs, and I personally believe that Roydell Williams, who's down at Florida State now, and the other backs last year kept Alabama from using their two best backs last year, and that were the two freshmen in Justice Haynes and Jam Miller. So I think the running back room is going to be better. I think in the Washington transfer in Jeremy Bernard, even though he was the number 3 option at Washington, I think you got a guy there who can be, let's go recent history, John Mechie-esque, great route runner, can make some big plays. You've got Ryan Williams, who has star potential. I think Kendrick Law is poised for a breakout with his speed. And I think the wide receiver that benefited the most from this offensive game plan change is probably Kobe Prentice. And I expect to see him. And here's one guy that if you'd have told me to name this guy on July 4th, sitting around the barbecue, I could not have named this guy. Didn't know he existed. But Caleb Adams is all everyone's talking about right now. Here's a guy who is going to play slot, could actually keep Kobe Prentice off the field sometimes, and has worked his way to having the trust of Jalen Milroe and the coaches. So Caleb Adams is another guy. And then when you get on that offensive line, as we talk about that side of the ball, from left tackle to left guard to center to right guard, that's the best offensive line in the SEC, in my opinion, and one of the best in the country. And then if you can get right tackle worked out with Elijah Pritchett and company out there, that is really solid. And Vandermark, the transfer from Michigan State, could play the most crucial role on this team because he can play center behind Brailsford. He can play either guard position, and I think he has a chance to play at the next level too. So what a great portal pickup on a guy who probably is just going to be a plug in a hole that has sprung a leak at the center or either guard position if there's an injury. So I love the way this offense is built. You have a blocking tight end, you have a receiving tight end. So I think Kalen DeBoer actually has, not the top end receiver weapons that he had at Washington, but I think as a unit 11 strong, I think he has potentially better talent on this offense to maybe match what the Huskies did last year.
So, Jim, as we look at this season opener Saturday against Western Kentucky, Bama's more than likely going to win this football game, right? Maybe other years this is kind of just glossed over. Hey, it's Western Kentucky. You're a 30.5 point favorite. No big deal. It is a big deal when you're kicking off a brand new era of football for the first time in, essentially 2 decades as Kalen DeBoer's tenure gets going. What do Alabama fans most want to see in this game? Because it's not like you're playing an FCS team, right? But again, you are a 30-point favorite, but how it looks, much of how this season, how it looks is, I kind of feel like, just as important for Kalen DeBoer and this team as anything else. So what's the ideal season opener look like for this football team on Saturday night?
Well, I think it's built really nice because Western Kentucky, by design, is a football team that is going to throw the football a ton. And your weakness on the other side, on the defensive side of the ball, is just likely inexperience in the secondary. Now, you got a much simpler defense in Kane Womack than you had under Nick Saban. Nick Saban was like the 4th year of trigonometry. And now we're going into a very basic geometry defense where you're going to let the athletes be athletes. You're going to play a lot more zone coverage. You're going to just keep people in front of you, make a tackle, live to play another down. And that's going to, I think, benefit the young secondary to not be really overcomplicated on what they're doing defensively. Just allow the 5 stars you have on that side in the secondary that are true freshmen to get out there and play freely. But you're going to get out there against Western Kentucky, and they're a team that's going to try to throw the ball 30 times, 40 times. If they want to, they're going to try to throw it 50 times. That's just the way their coaches believe in playing football. And what better way would you like to start the season when your secondary is maybe the biggest question mark. Than to get them out there in live rounds in front of 100,000 fans and television on ESPN to see the ball being slung around the yard. And if you make a mistake and let someone run free and give up an easy 6, it's a game likely that your offense is going to be able to score 40 or 50 on the other side too. So I think it's a perfect setup for Alabama. But I'm watching that secondary. If you're a Bama fan, watch those guys and see who emerges, who can make some plays. You got a great transfer from Michigan, a great transfer from USC. You got Malachi Moore back, who's a permanent captain. And then everybody else out there, you're plugging in some really talented guys who have had no seat time, and you just want to see how they work together. And you're going to be watching what the 4-2-5 swarm really is, because everybody knew what Nick Saban and Kirby Smart and Jeremy Pruitt all came from the same tree. Everybody knew what they wanted to do defensively. Now, what does a 4-2-5 swarm look like? Roman Harper told us on our show, the great analyst, former Saints Super Bowl winning Alabama DB. He says it's very different. There'll be some really easy short throws for the opposing team, not as much press man coverage, and it'll look very, very different than what you've seen under Nick Saban and Kirby Smart. That probably will be the biggest thing as just a layman watching football when you don't really know a whole bunch of X's and O's. There will be times you'll be screaming, going, come on, man, let's cover them tight. Let's get up there close. We're letting them catch too many short passes. But it's going to be one of those where they're going to have to make a lot of good 4-yard plays to score touchdowns. And the goal is not to give up the 60-yard over-the-top touchdown that cost Alabama's, a couple of games a few years ago, especially that 2022 game in Neyland Stadium.
Jim, on that note, really quickly, I am fascinated to kind of follow along. What is the vibe and the mood in Tuscaloosa if Alabama's winning games, say 38-35, 35-31? Because it's so different, right?
Yeah.
To your point, like it almost – winning cures all. Winning is the end goal. Doesn't matter how you get there. But doesn't it feel like it'll feel kind of icky for Alabama fans if you're giving up 30, 35 points and winning a ball game? It's just not how we've seen Bama win games in the past.
No. Everyone loves the old, as they called it, murder ball days, where they ran
joyless murder ball.
Yeah, you just run it. Eventually, you would have that third quarter drive that went for 15 plays, milked 9 minutes off the clock, and just anaconda squeezed the opponent to death, and you would win the football game. Nobody wants to go back to the way Gene Stallings won game. Best team on the field, and he would beat Vandy 17-7, or he'd win games 20-10. Nobody wants to go back to that. It's not going to be that. But nobody wants what you had against Hugh Freeze's Ole Miss team for a couple of years either, where we were having to win a game in the 40s or lose a game in the 40s. You don't really want it to be like that classic national championship game in the desert when you beat Clemson in the high 30s and 40s. So somewhere in between. But I do believe Alabama is going to have to score a lot of points. I do think this defense will be closer to middle tier when it comes to giving up points, somewhere in that 4 to 8 neighborhood, as opposed to 1 or 2 where they're used to being. Just because, the offenses are better in the SEC than they were at times during Nick Saban's time, just more really good offenses. And I just think just the style of play and the youth in that secondary is going to open up some free plays.
Jim, let's talk the other team in the state of Alabama, the Auburn Tigers. Again, they open up with Alabama A&M. It's a no-doubter going to be kind of a name-your-score game. But is there anything in particular when it comes to Auburn you're excited to see in that opener? I mean, again, we've got Peyton Thorne. We've got those freshmen at wideout. We've got DJ Durkin's defense. You guys are right there, again, as plugged in as anybody. Anything in particular that after hearing things in fall camp you're looking forward to seeing in the opener?
Well, first, I apologize for my dogs. I may have grown up an Alabama fan. They grew up Auburn fans. So when you said Auburn, it perks up a little bit. They're down there chatting now about how excited they are for Peyton Thorne. This is year 2 for Hugh Freeze. And we had Peyton Thorne on this week. And the thing that he said that resonated with me was, and I asked him this once off the record at Talladega this year. Saw him and a bunch of his buddies in the infield at Talladega. And he says, and he said this on our interview the other day, just in the second year of a program, a coach has more of his players on the roster. And he says these are more Hugh Freeze players now, things that Hugh Freeze believes in, both on the football field and off the football field, which is personality, is faith and family and that kind of stuff. So Peyton Thorne, like Hugh Freeze, likes the chemistry and the makeup of this roster. How talented is this roster? Well, I believe if you go back and watch the Georgia game, that final drive where Auburn had ball in hand and a chance to drive the field and beat Georgia, Peyton Thorne put balls on hands, and they should have been caught. 3 or 4 crucial plays on that final drive should have been caught. They were drops or bad route run. So I think Peyton Thorne has it in him to play winning football, SEC winning football. We saw it one year at Michigan State where he had talented wide receivers and an elite running back, and he was able to get a lot of wins. I think he has an elite running back, and they have recruited elite wide receivers. Now, their most talented guys are true freshmen, and that's what I'm looking for when the lights come on Saturday night against Alabama A&M. You want to let those young guys get out there, shake off the nerves, let them eat there in front of 88,000 and get a little swagger and a little momentum go. You go back to 2010, Auburn, that great national championship run. You really didn't know what you had in Cam Newton until a few games in. I don't think you're going to know what you have in this wide receiver core until a few games in. But gradually that team got better, and the potential is there for Auburn to get better. So I'm watching Peyton Thorne with talent around him. That's what I want to see. But I think when it comes to Auburn's offense the last few years, you just got to first see if they've got an offensive line that is mid-tier SEC quality. Just give him a little mid-tier protection. Doesn't have to be elite protection. You don't have to go win Cole Kubelik's Joe Moore Award, right? You just got to go out there and be 4th or 5th in the league in offensive play and give the guy a chance to throw the football downfield where he's not running for his life. If Auburn improves that much on the offensive line, I think Hugh Freeze coaches great offensive football, and they have the talent outside of the offensive line to be elite. And defensively, secondary's good, linebackers are solid, and the Bleedy kid who came in for Indiana is wrecking havoc. So I think at every level, the Auburn defense is potentially really good. And I have all the respect in the world for DJ Durkin as a defensive coordinator. That guy can coach. I know for a fact at least twice, Nick Saban wanted him in Tuscaloosa, either as an analyst or on the coaching staff, and it just never worked out. And for that guy, Nick Saban, to want a guy like DJ Durkin tells me all I need to know about that guy's X's and O's. So I think he'll have a good scheme on defense. But I'm watching those receivers like everybody else. But if you just want me to peek to see how I think the season's going to go, these first 4 games at home before you get Oklahoma, I'm going to be watching the offensive line to see if they're SEC quality.
Jim, of the 4 big SEC games in week 1, Georgia, Clemson, Florida, Miami, Texas A&M, Notre Dame, and LSU, USC, which of those intrigues you the most?
They all do, truthfully, because I think Dabo Swinney and Clemson could have a little something for Georgia in the 11 o'clock game on ABC there in Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. First off, it's not in Athens, and for some reason, Georgia struggles more at Mercedes-Benz Stadium than they do in Athens. Now, Nick Saban's not Dabo Swinney, and that's not Alabama on the other sidelines. But Dabo's got an elite defense. So that is going to challenge Carson Beck to find some playmakers because Brock Bowers is gone. Ladd McConkey's gone. Rara Thomas has been kicked off the team. So who's going to make some plays? ETN, according to people, could be suspended for that game. A 1-game suspension. Going to be that game maybe. So you could be without some playmakers. So I want to see who's going to make some plays. Carson Beck's good, but who's going to make some plays? You can only, at quarterback, you can only throw it or hand it off to guys who are eventually going to make some plays. So he's got to have some help. I want to see who that is for Georgia. And when you're going against a great defense, I know this isn't a gambling show, but I love the under in this game.
We love to talk gambling, Jim. Yeah. So fire away.
Yeah. I love the under in this game. I don't think Georgia and Clemson combined is going to get, I think it was 48.5 the last I looked. I think this is going to be, it's not going to be 7-0. I think it was when they blast played in Charlotte to kick off the season. It's not going to be that. It's going to be low scoring, in my opinion, something like a 20-13, 21-13 type win for Georgia. But I think it's going to be close. And I think Clemson will keep that one very interesting, especially if Cade Klubnik has grown up any at all. I really like that game. Sunday night's my second most intriguing game because from what I'm hearing, Lincoln Riley and USC has cut out, I'll use a Deion Sanders phrase, he's cut out some of the Louis who have been there with big NIL deals, and he's pared it down to a few more football players. And I think their defense will be a little bit better. LSU's defense will be a little bit better. And, Miller Moss is being coached by Lincoln Riley. And you tell me when he doesn't have good quarterback play. And then there's, LSU, who's replacing the Heisman Trophy winner quarterback. They're replacing receivers. I think Nussmeier can get it done at quarterback. Can LSU, as Nick Saban says, continue to shake trees in Louisiana and find, 5 great receivers that fall out of those trees and onto the ground ready to go? Probably so. So that's going to be a fun football game. And I'm intrigued to see if USC can play with LSU. I think Texas A&M beats Notre Dame. They're the betting favorite. And I think, truthfully, Texas A&M had a little bit of an attitude problem, a little bit of a program problem with Jimbo Fisher. Not X's and O's, just somebody holding people accountable for doing your job. Mike Elko's a no-nonsense kind of guy. He's a defensive-minded coach. I think that works good, especially going against Riley Leonard, a guy he knows all the flaws. And he played it this week in his news conference. Elko said, really, I think the advantage is with Riley because we're playing mostly my style of defense, and he saw it every day in practice. He's not really playing our style of offense. He's got a new offense, so he knows more about me than I know about him. I think he's setting him up there for a little bait and switch. I think he knows how to design something, and he knows what Riley's eyes are going to see, and he's going to sneak something in the back door and pick off 1 or 2 passes from Riley Leonard. And then Miami of Florida and Florida, I know it's Georgia and Georgia Tech. I think it's called good old-fashioned hate. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this Miami-Florida game is going to be nasty. I think it'll be nasty in the stands. I think it'll be nasty on the field, pregame and postgame. This is going to be a bar brawl, and I'm a big Billy Napier fan. I think Florida gets away with a win in that one. As far as those 4 games, my biggest exposure for the SEC in losing the football game is Sunday night, which would be a big upset, USC over LSU. I think Florida can win. I expect Texas A&M to win, and I'd be shocked if Georgia lost the football game, but I think it's going to be closer than a lot of people think.
Jim, in closing, so you've got USC beating LSU. If that happens, what would that mean for the Brian Kelly era in Baton Rouge? I mean, it's just one game, and we're in an era with a 12-team playoff, but haven't won a season opener since 2019. The loser of that game effectively is going to be feeling the heat, right? I think maybe Lincoln Riley more so would nationally, Brian Kelly, I believe, more so locally. But I mean, in your mind, what would that mean for the Brian Kelly era? Because I can imagine the folks down there at LSU, they're not going to take too kindly to that if they drop another season opener.
Well, as you know, we're now in a basketball state where I'm from. I mean, Alabama is a basketball state. Alabama and Auburn basketball. So let me put this in NCAA tournament terms. LSU loses on Sunday night. It's going to be like losing in the Maui Classic. They wanted to win. Would have been a great win that would have helped us down the road. Impacts the season, not at all. You come back, you win the SEC, you're automatically in. You win the rest of your games except one, you're still in the playoffs. You win all of them except 2, and you're 9-3. You're still in the bubble. You may get in. See what else happens. So it's not going to be a season-ending loss. The greatest thing about this 12-team matchup and setup is for the playoffs. It allows you to get better as the season goes. In the past, you lost right here in the beginning in this first game, and it could impact you all the way to the national championship, the 14 playoff, and before that, the BCS. You can survive 1 loss. I think you can survive 2 losses in the SEC and the Big Ten. And at some point, you may be able to survive 3 losses, depending on who they are to. So I don't think it hurts LSU at all. Somebody's going to lose the game. Florida State is a great example. They just lost to Georgia Tech. I don't think they're out of it yet. They're our first bubble team, though, but I don't think they're out of it yet. So the doors are open to lose a quality game and still make your way back into the playoffs. So I don't think it impacts LSU at all. But like anybody in the SEC, there'll be tremendous overreaction.
Jim Dunaway, the next round. Those guys do a great job every single day. Jim, let folks know exactly what you guys are doing on a daily basis and where they can check out your work.
Oh, there's too much to name. We have Tyler Booker, if you're a Bama fan, every week at 9:25 Central. Part of our NIL deal. When we started this, we wanted to give some money back to the student athletes. So every year we've had between 2 and 6 players on paying them money to join us each week, putting money in their pocket. So we got Tyler Booker Mondays at 9:25 Central. And on Tuesdays, we've got Peyton Thorne at 9:25 Central. We've started really inexpensive 2 fan sites for Alabama and Auburn, covercrimson.com and thebarnauburn.com, where you have some really great content from some great energetic people who are more front-facing audio and video personality people instead of writers who try to do a little on-camera stuff. So these guys are really talented. They put on some entertaining shows. And then, we're at the games with Emily Grace McWhorter. She's at the biggest game every week. Taylor Corn will be down at Auburn at Jordan-Hare Stadium this week. We do pregame shows. So even on Saturdays and Sundays, we've got coverage on our platform. Everything's at Next Round Live on any platform you can think of. Like us, subscribe, and give us a follow, and we appreciate it so much.
Jim, congrats to you guys on the success. Much deserved, and appreciate you taking the time. Let's definitely do it again soon.
Anytime, man. Thank you.